back or to my channel. Today I'm going to be talking about all of the classics I read in 2024. I read 11 classics in total, and to be honest, the classics were the only good thing about my reading this year. All the other books I read were either average or below average, with a few good ones at the beginning of the year. I'm much more hopeful for 2025 for reading, writing, everything. And I've already read one book this year and I loved it. I'm going to be talking about these in order from my least favorite to my favorite, or the worst to the best. And I did this on a TikTok and I got a lot of mixed responses. There were a lot of popular classics or well-loved classics that I didn't like, and then classics that are not very well-loved that I liked. So keep in mind, these are just my opinions and there is something that I liked about everything in here. Before I start, I want to say I'm going to be working really hard on this channel in 2025, and I'm doing all sorts of reading and writing content and a few vlogs here and there. So if you're into that sort of thing, please make sure to like and subscribe. Okay, the first book on this list, and number 11, aka my least favorite classic, was The Old Man, the Sea by Ernest Hemingway. So The Old Man, the Sea is about an old man, a fisherman, who has gone a very long time without catching a fish. So one day he goes out much farther into sea in hopes of actually catching a fish. I found this one really boring and mundane, and not in a good way, because there are some classics that are really slow paced and not much happens in it, but there's a lot of depth and meaning to it, and this was not one of those books for me. I know Ernest Hemingway won a Nobel Peace Prize for this, and I know that if you research it after the fact and you research the allegories, the different metaphors and meanings in this book, like men's need to prove themselves, or how at the end of the day and at the end of life you only have stories to tell and not everyone's going to believe these stories, that's all great and I would have loved to read about that. But from the text itself, there's no way you could gather that. Like, you need to do research after reading it, and that is not something that I look for in a book. I want a book to have depth without me having to research it. And I love researching books and classics specifically, but a book and a text should be able to have depth and meaning on its own outside of research, and the research should just be enhancing it and enriching it. And for a book that's not actually supposed to be about fishing, there is so much talk about fishing and so many technical terms used for fishing, and especially in the Old English language, it didn't make sense why Ernest Hemingway would be writing so much about fishing if it's not actually about fishing. So I didn't like this book, and I don't think I'm going to be reading any more of Hemingway's work. Next book on this list is Algoviva by Clarice Lispector, and this is another unpopular opinion because it is going viral on TikTok recently and a lot of people love her just historically. So Algoviva is basically just Clarice Lispector's musings and thoughts and philosophical ideas and just a bunch of Clarice Lispector's writings, and I thought it was beautiful. I thought there were some beautiful metaphors and quotes and ideas, but it was so incoherent most of the time, and most of it just felt like shadows of thoughts and ideas that would be really beautiful that were never fleshed out or strung together well. And I've said this a few times on TikTok. I'm just going to read like a paragraph, and I want you to tell me if you know what in the world she's talking about. I'm going to read the same paragraph that I read in my December reading wrap-up. I must interrupt to say that X is what exists inside me. X, I bathe in that this. It's impronounceable. All I do not know is X. Death? Death is X. But much life too, for life is unpronounceable. X that shakes within me and I fear its pitch. A tense string that when plucked emits pure electricity without melody. The unpronounceable instant. An other sensibility is what becomes aware of X. I hope you live X so you experience a kind of creating sleep that stretches out through the veins. X is neither good or bad. Always independent. And yes, when I say X, I mean the letter X. I gave this one 2 stars. The next one on this list is the most unknown classic that I have on this list, and one of the most unknown books I have in my library, and that is Lizzie Bright and the Buckminster Boy. I literally searched it up on TikTok and there were 2 videos about this. So Lizzie Bright and the Buckminster Boy is a historical fiction. It is something that actually happened, but it's the author's interpretation or just writing how he thought the situation would have played out, or just his idea of the situation. Basically, there's a boy that goes with his father, who's a minister, to this island, and they want to take the island, his dad and all the townspeople, but there are indigenous people on the island that obviously don't want to leave. It is a depressing book. I cried, and there are some funny scenes, some sweet moments, some really nice quotes, but it's unpopular for a reason. I didn't really feel much when I was reading it. I cried at scenes that are objectively sad, but I didn't feel anything specific for the characters, and I felt like they weren't really nuanced a lot, and the writing just felt very impassionate and passive to me. I think I would recommend this to new readers or younger readers, even though there are some dark scenes and dark ideas in this. The next one on this list is The Outsider by Albert Camus. I think that's how you pronounce his name. He's French. And The Outsider, or The Stranger, is about a man who is nihilistic, so he doesn't feel or think that there's any meaning to anything in life. And he does a senseless act of violence in this book, and he has to deal with the consequences while being someone that's nihilistic and doesn't really believe that anything has any meaning. In fact, the first line of this book is, "My mother died today, or maybe yesterday, I don't know." So I like The Outsider, but I think the reason I didn't rate it as high is because I had such high expectations for it, because so many people I know and trust recommended it to me that I was just disappointed. I liked it. I thought the ideas presented were good, and my favorite part was the jail scene part, because he was reflecting on how his nihilism had affected his life and nihilism in general. He was talking about it and he started getting hysterical. And although I definitely didn't agree with everything he was saying, I thought it was a really, really good passage, and I even marked it. But then the end was just anticlimactic, and that might have been purposeful, but I wished for more and I hoped for more. And maybe that is the effect that it's supposed to present, but I think that other classics present this idea in a better way, like the one I'm going to talk about after a few books. I do think I'm going to try other books by Albert Camus though, because I do enjoy his writing and I think his ideas are very interesting. The next one on this list is The Yellow Wallpaper by Charlotte Perkins Gilman. So The Yellow Wallpaper is about this woman who is going through a depressive episode, and so her husband rents out an estate for them to stay at for a few months until she gets better, and he places her into this room and she just becomes hyper fixated and obsessed with the yellow wallpaper in the bedroom. And at first she just thinks it's hideous and ugly, but then she just becomes unnaturally infatuated with it. I love this one. It was done so well. I loved researching this after the fact too. The ending was so haunting and well done, and I literally had to read the last few lines a few times before it really clicked in my head what had just happened. And there's so much that you can explore and theorize about this, like what does the wallpaper represent, what does the ending mean. The reason this isn't higher is because it is a short story, so it can't really do a lot, and I felt like the writing, especially in the beginning, was a little bit passive, and we didn't get to hear more about her feelings and how her life was before this. The next book is A Metamorphosis by Franz Kafka, and this is about a man who wakes up one day as a bug, and he finds that his family and society as a whole has discarded him because he's no longer useful for them and he can no longer bring them in money. And there are so many beautiful quotes and ideas in this. This was another sad book. I loved it. I love Kafka's work, what I've read of Kafka's work. This one did take me a while to read just because I was in a reading slump, so maybe that tainted my view of it too. But it was easy and it was good, but I prefer another one of Kafka's books that I'm gonna be talking about a bit later. I also had fun researching this one after the fact because Kafka himself felt discarded by his family and felt like an outcast from society, and we can see that from his letters to his father and just his own life. The next book is a controversial one because not a lot of people like it, and that is The Catcher in the Rye by J.D. Salinger, I'm not sure. So The Catcher in the Rye is about this boy who is very angsty and a moody teenager, and he's failed at yet another boarding school, so he runs off to New York. And he lives in New York, but he doesn't go back home. He just stays in hotels and just explores the city alone, and not just explores the city, he explores his own emotions, and we see how he deals with different people and talks to different people and how different people in society interact with others. And I loved how atmospheric this one was. It was immersive and sweet, and I loved the ending, and it is one of those books that I genuinely want to store in my pocket, especially this copy. Like, I love this copy, and even though it's almost 300 pages, it's 230 pages, yeah, I didn't feel that long. I love this one, and I understand that people think that Holden's annoying, but I think that he would be relatable to a lot of people, especially teenagers. And I think it was nice to see a different perspective and read a book from a different perspective than what we usually see. Most main characters are at least naturally very kind-hearted and nice, and are like, this is an unconventional main character, and I liked reading from a different perspective. And we're reaching the top 4 now, and number 4 is The Telltale Heart by Edgar Allan Poe. So this is about a boy who wants to kill this old man who is living with him or near him, and what happens after the fact. Love this one so much. It is so gothic and perfect, and maybe I might be biased because it's the first Edgar Allan Poe short story that I read, and I associated it with a series of unfortunate events. I love this copy too because it also has The Fall of the House of Usher, which I loved. The next book is Franz Kafka, and this is a book that I read right before The Outsider, and I enjoyed this one much more. So the trial is about a man who wakes up one day to find that he's under arrest, and he doesn't know why he's under arrest, and throughout the book he just never finds out why he's under arrest, and he needs to defend himself against something and he doesn't even know what it is, and he's being prosecuted for it, and it's the strangest way and the most complicated, strange, odd way that he's being prosecuted and the way that the trial is going on. I feel like the question that Franz Kafka poses in this book is like, what does it mean really? Like, what does all of this mean? And I love the ending, and I love this book. It's one of my favorites. The second to last book is Animal Farm by George Orwell. So Animal Farm is about these group of animals in a farm who feel like they're being treated unjustly, and so they revolt against the humans on their farm, and they kick out the humans and they start running the farm all together. But slowly the bigger and smarter animals start gaining more power and control, which is something that they said would never happen. If this sounds familiar, then it should. This is an allegory for communism, specifically the Russian Communist Revolution of 1917, and the similarities and contrasts are haunting. The ending was incredible, and I had goosebumps throughout the last few pages. I love this one. I read it in one sitting, and it was so fast-paced and good and raw. I loved it, and like I said, the context makes this like a whole new level. And finally, my favorite classic of this year and my all-time favorite classic and one of my favorite books, Anna Karenina by Leo Tolstoy. So Anna Karenina is essentially about Russian society, and it's named after one of the characters in this book, Anna Karenina, who is unhappy in her marriage, and she goes against societal standards by cheating on her husband with a younger man and running off with him. And it's not just about her. I usually don't like affairs in books, especially in classics. I don't like the way it's written, but this was done so well, and there's so many different plot lines and storylines and characters that we're following, and we see so many different perspectives, which I love, and it's so immersive and passionate, and there are some of the most beautiful quotes and speeches and passages in here. In the weeks where I was reading this, I genuinely felt like I was part of the society. It's so beautiful, and there's some romance, there's like different relationships between family members, between strangers. I think this was the first classic of the year, so that definitely set a very high standard for the rest of the books. That is it for today's video. I really hope you guys enjoyed. If you did, please make sure to like and subscribe, and remember that these are just my own opinions. I also have a TikTok and a Substack, so if you want to go follow them, then please do. And I will see you next week. Goodbye. It's 80 pages. The next book on this string of a cello.